When you think of PlayStation today, you probably think of Sony's legendary line of video game consoles. But originally, PlayStation wasn't supposed to be Sony's console. In the late 80s, Sony and Nintendo were working together on a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo. Sony would handle the CD technology, and Nintendo would provide the console. On paper, it sounded like a perfect partnership, but as the deal progressed, Nintendo started to worry. The contract gave Sony control over the CD format and licensing, which meant Sony could potentially gain more power than Nintendo. They didn't like that idea. Instead of quietly renegotiating, Nintendo made a dramatic move. At CES 1991, just one day after Sony publicly revealed the Nintendo PlayStation, Nintendo announced that they had abandoned Sony and partnered with Philips instead. Sony found out about this betrayal at the same time as everyone else. The partnership was over. For Sony, this was a turning point. At first, Sony explored the idea of working with Sega instead. Both companies had reasons to dislike Nintendo, and Sega of America was interested, but Sega of Japan ultimately shut the idea down, arguing that Sony wasn't competent enough. Instead of backing out of the industry, Sony decided to build its own console, not to copy Nintendo or Sega, but to compete with them directly. And this time, Sony did something very different. They chose CDs instead of cartridges. This decision changed everything. Cartridges were fast, but they were expensive to manufacture and extremely limited in storage. CDs were cheap, easy to produce, and could hold far more data. That made developers very happy. Even companies that had been loyal to Nintendo for years began to switch sides. Square, the studio behind Final Fantasy, famously moved to PlayStation after struggling with cartridge limitations. Final Fantasy VII became one of the most important games of the era, and it was exclusive to PlayStation. And this wasn't the only example. Namco, Capcom, and Konami were among other Nintendo developers that focused more on PS1 during that era. Nintendo wasn't the only one in trouble. Sega had dominated the early 90s with the Genesis, but a series of management mistakes damaged their reputation. The Sega CD and the 32X confused customers and developers alike. By the time Saturn had arrived, many companies were already losing confidence in Sega. The Saturn was not designed with 3D in mind. Its architecture made development difficult, especially compared to Sony's simpler, more developer-friendly hardware. Sony also understood pricing. At E3 of 1995, Sega announced that the Saturn would cost $399. Sony walked on the stage and simply said, $299. That moment became legendary. PlayStation was cheaper, easier to develop for, and supported CD audio playback, which made it attractive even outside of gaming. For many people, it was their first CD player. By the mid-90s, everything seemed to be working in Sony's favor. PlayStation was gaining developers, it was gaining players, it was gaining momentum. But there was still one thing missing. Nintendo had Mario, Sega had Sonic, but PlayStation didn't have a face. Sony scrapped the idea of a mascot because they believed that the PlayStation brand itself was enough. While Sony hesitated, another company saw an opportunity. That company was Naughty Dog.
At 22:16 hours, we got a call that a man was acting erratically in the store. He's acting like a maniac. When we arrived on the scene, the store had been emptied of its customers because of the behavior of this gentleman. It took us a while to control the situation, and there was some frustration involved. We've had 3 incidences this week. I wouldn't go as far as to say epidemic. They're annoying.
Before Crash Bandicoot, Naughty Dog was basically 2 people. Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin had been working together since high school, originally under the name Jam Software. For nearly a decade, they made games almost entirely on their own. They learned to program, design, and problem solve by necessity, not by choice. That independence came at a cost. Earlier in their career, Naughty Dog had worked with Electronic Arts. While EA provided funding, the relationship was restrictive. The studio struggled to grow, and when Andy and Jason left EA to go independent, they nearly lost everything. That experience shaped every decision they made afterward. When Universal Interactive approached them with a deal for their sixth game, Way of the Warrior, Universal offered full funding, creative freedom, and something unusual for the time, a housekeeping deal. Naughty Dog would be given office space, housing, and the technology they needed to work. In return, Universal would publish the game. For Andy and Jason, this was exactly what they had been looking for. Way of the Warrior released on the 3DO in 1994. It wasn't a massive hit, but it was successful enough to prove that the partnership could work. More importantly, it earned Naughty Dog something they had never really had before: stability. That stability made the next step possible. After finishing Way of the Warrior, Andy and Jason packed up everything that was left for them, and along with Jason's dog Morgan, who the studio was named after, began a 3-day road trip to Universal Interactive offices. They didn't just move locations, they moved into a completely new phase of their careers. During that drive, they talked about what they wanted to make next. They knew one thing for sure: whatever their next game was, it had to be bigger, riskier, and more ambitious than anything they had done before. They had funding, they had creative freedom, and for the first time, they had the chance to build something that could define a generation. That road trip didn't just lead them to Universal. It led them to Crash Bandicoot.
Fear not, Plumber Boy, the Bandicoot will come. I'm coming to get you, pal. Hi, how are you? Am I on the right street? Can you tell me where Nintendo is? People run a lot here. This is really nice. Plumber Boy, your time has come.
During that 3-day drive to Universal Interactive, Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin talked about one thing non-stop: what their next game would be. They knew the industry was changing. By the mid-90s, gamers were obsessed with one idea: 3D. Racing games, shooters, and fighting games were all making the jump. But there was one major genre that hadn't followed yet: platformers. Mario and Sonic were still kings of the industry, but they were stuck in 2 dimensions. A true 3D platformer didn't exist yet. Andy and Jason saw an opening. If they could be the first to do it right, they wouldn't just make another game. They could define the genre. But there was a problem. No one knew how a 3D platformer was supposed to work. They began discussing the options. The first was the safest: make a traditional 2D platformer but use 3D models. That approach would look modern, but it wouldn't feel new. The second option was the most ambitious: a fully open 3D world with a camera the player could control. But in 1994, that idea felt dangerous. The hardware was unproven, and no one knew if players could even handle that much freedom. So they chose a third option: a compromise. The players wouldn't control the camera, but the camera itself could change. Sometimes it would behave like a 2D side scroller, sometimes it would face the player, but most of the time it would sit behind the character, following him forward into the world. But at all times, the player could move in 8 directions. It was neither 2D nor fully open 3D. It was something new. Because the camera usually focused on the character's back, Andy and Jason referred to the project as Sonic's ass game. That's because Sonic had popularized the idea of making a platformer out of an obscure animal. So it would be a Sonic inspired game, but the difference is that here the camera mostly focuses on, well, you know where. Despite the name, slowly Donkey Kong Country became the main influence. It had an intense, instant decision-making structure that they loved. By the time they arrived at Universal, the direction was clear. They weren't just making a platformer. They were trying to invent what a 3D platformer could be, without knowing if it would even work.
So anyway, I'm playing Jet Moto, right? And I'm riding on this jet motorcycle, and I'm hurtling through different terrain: snow, concrete, ocean, jungle. I mean, when you got that kind of power between your legs, you don't know what to expect. Anything could happen.
Once Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin knew they wanted to make a 3D platformer, the next question became unavoidable. What could actually run this thing? In mid-90s, choosing a platform wasn't just a business decision, it was a design decision. The hardware would determine what the game could and couldn't be. Their first option was the 3DO. Naughty Dog had just shipped Way of the Warrior on it, so the platform was familiar, but familiarity wasn't enough. The system was expensive, its audience was small, and more importantly, it wasn't built to push fast, textured 3D environments. For a game that depended on motion, animation, and visual clarity, it simply wasn't a good fit. The Atari Jaguar had similar problems. On paper, it was powerful. In reality, its architecture was confusing, poorly documented, and difficult to use efficiently. Building an experimental 3D game that the developers already struggled with would have meant fighting the machine instead of learning from it. Nintendo's next console, later revealed as Nintendo 64, was still a mystery. The hardware wasn't finalized, release dates were unclear, and Nintendo's development environment was famously restrictive. Sega Saturn almost became the platform of their choice, but the Saturn was designed with 2D games in mind, not 3D worlds. Its dual CPU structure made simple things complicated and complicated things nearly impossible. For a team trying to invent a genre from scratch, that complexity was a serious risk. So they chose Sony's PlayStation, because Sony had already made good hardware before, but also it was relatively easy to develop for, despite being powerful. It would do the job of an expensive PC, but it was much more affordable.
Yes?
Are you aware, Mr. Feldman, that Sony's PlayStation has over 200 games?
No?
NHL Face-Off 97, Jet Moto, Toval number 1, Destruction Derby 2, Crash Bandicoot. I could go on.
I'm gonna come down there and kick your ass.
You got any battery cables? I'm having a little trouble with my truck.
When Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin arrived at Universal Interactive, they weren't alone for long. There was already someone there who understood exactly the kind of game they were trying to make and the kind of hardware it would need. That person was Mark Cerny. By the time he met Naughty Dog, Cerny wasn't just a developer, he was a legend, programmer, game designer, hardware expert, and manager. Someone who could speak the language of engineers and artists. Cerny had entered the game industry early. As a teenager, he moved to Japan to work directly with Japanese developers, something unheard for a Western developer at the time. He started as a freelancer, but quickly built a reputation as someone who understood systems at a deep level. One of his earliest major credits was Marble Madness, where he worked as lead programmer. The game's physics-heavy design showed his interest in how hardware constraints could shape gameplay, a theme that would follow him throughout his career. After that, Sega took notice. Cerny was invited to work on hardware projects at Sega, contributing to the development of the Sega Genesis and later joining Sega Technical Institute in the United States. There he worked on Sonic the Hedgehog 2, gaining first-hand experience with mascot-driven design and fast-paced platforming. Eventually, Cerny left Sega and joined Universal Interactive, where he served as a senior designer and producer. That's where his path crossed with Naughty Dog. For Andy and Jason, Mark Cerny wasn't just a producer overseeing deadlines. He was a translator. He helped bridge the gap between Naughty Dog's experimental ideas and the realities of console hardware. He understood Sony's design philosophy, had strong relationships inside the industry, and knew what kind of risks were worth taking. Cerny believed in what they were trying to do. When Naughty Dog pushed against hardware limits, Cerny didn't tell them to simplify the idea. He helped them refine it. He understood why choices mattered. In many ways, Mark Cerny acted as a stabilizing force. Andy and Jason were inventing a genre. Cerny helped make sure that invention could survive contact with real hardware, real publishers, and eventually a real audience. And as it turned out, this wouldn't be the last time Mark Cerny would help shape the future of PlayStation.
Turn the pizza around! It's stuffed crust, you eat it backwards! Carry on!
In case you forgot, you're supposed to eat stuffed crust backwards. With a ring of cheese baked right into the crust, it's the most fun you can have with the pizza. Right now, a large one topping is only $9.99. Pizza Hut, the best pizzas under one roof.
Would you like to work here? I'm not housebroken.
Crash Bandicoot was ambitious. A fully 3D platformer on a console that was still brand new. To make it work, Naughty Dog had to think like both designers and engineers. Every choice, from polygon budgets to camera angles, was dictated by the hardware, and every innovation was aimed at making the game feel fast, fun, and expressive. The team quickly realized that polygon limits were a constant constraint. Each frame could contain only about 1500 polygons, and 600 of those were reserved just for Crash himself. That meant around 1/3 of the game's visual budget went to the main character alone. Every environment, enemy, and prop had to be designed to fit within the remaining space, without sacrificing clarity or style. To turn ambitious concept art into playable 3D worlds, Naughty Dog invested in high-end silicon graphics workstations, the same computers used in Hollywood for movies like Jurassic Park and Terminator 2. Each workstation cost roughly $100,000 and ran Power Animator, which was a powerful 3D graphics software that would cost $75,000 for each machine. It was designed for shots in live-action movies and not for fully computer-generated stuff like video games. But it was the only good 3D software of the time. So even with enough money, the video game industry still hadn't evolved enough. So just like when Jason and Andy were teenagers, they had to use what they had to do stuff that you weren't supposed to do with it. The team also had to innovate on the software side. PlayStation programming was primarily done in C, but Andy Gavin wrote performance critical sections in assembly, squeezing every ounce of speed out of the console. They discovered that the shaded polygon mode was faster than the default texture polygon mode for certain objects, and they used this to maintain high frame rates without sacrificing visual style. Working on PlayStation prototypes, often with manuals poorly translated from Japanese, the team explored every quirk of the hardware. They learned to borrow memory, optimize rendering, and manipulate the system's CPU and GPU in unconventional ways, all to make Crash move smoothly through lush, detailed worlds. Each limitation shaped gameplay decisions. Corridor-like levels helped manage memory. Polygon budgets influenced level density, and enemy placement and the camera decisions were chosen to keep action readable while masking areas that hadn't yet loaded. In short, the hardware dictated the rules and the designers turned them into fun. By thinking of the PlayStation as both a constraint and a canvas, Naughty Dog didn't just make a game that ran, they made a game that felt alive, responsive, and cinematic, proving that the new console could host a fully realized 3D platformer. Increasing creativity wasn't the only good thing that came out of those limitations. I say what makes Crash Bandicoot beautiful is its simplicity, which was also the result of the limitations. For example, Naughty Dog had plans for Crash to be able to pick up fruits and throw them, roll, kick, eat, swim, climb, and ride minecarts. Also, if you stayed idle for too long, lightning would hit and kill you. Some enemies would have weapons and Crash could disarm them. There were also too many power-ups and probably a fighting minigame. Acquiring Aku Aku was supposed to be much more complicated, and there was too much focus on the story. I personally think this stuff would have just overcomplicated the game. The console wasn't powerful enough, and as a result they had few enemies in each level. So they wanted to add different fruits as collectibles, but it would overcomplicate the system, so they landed on only one fictional fruit, Wumpa. They created a 3D model for it, but to save memory they exported every frame of its rotating as textures instead of using the actual 3D animation. But those weren't enough. They needed to add more stuff to the game so that the world wouldn't feel empty. There was barely any memory left, so they could use the simplest 3D object they could think of, a box. They filled every level with boxes, lots of boxes with different functionalities. Crates could hold stuff, explode, bounce, drop, stack, and be used as switches to trigger other things. They could also be used as extra challenge, boxes with extra life in them that were between explosive boxes. This box idea was a last minute addition by Jason and Andy. Thanks to the sound designer Mike Gollum, breaking them was fun.
Would you rather be playing hockey than working in this office building? You know that NHL Face-Off 97 was rated best hockey game by EGM. Realistic give and goes and one-timers with icon passing. Less vert, more hockey!
Crash Bandicoot took around 2 years to make, and in the first year they were just figuring out how to make it work. They had to go through much blood, sweat, and tears to make their game reach a playable state. They had a jungle level that looked so good the console could barely handle it, and there was a lava level that was hard to navigate because it had the same color as Crash. For their first playable demo, they had to create 3 playable levels through crunching. One of them was fine and the other 2 were great, so Naughty Dog sighed out of relief. They still had lots of hard things to do, but at least now they know that they can do it. They heavily edited those 3 levels into a videotape and sent it to Sony. It looked so good that it shocked Sony. Sony was so impressed that they shifted their focus entirely to Crash Bandicoot. Crash was so good that later when Sony themselves tried to make a 3D platformer for PS1, they eventually cancelled it because they couldn't make it as good as Crash.
英雄クラッシュバンディクー誕生です。偉いから歌までできちゃいました。今度の主役はこんなやつ。 3D オクスクロールアクションクラッシュバンディクー、しかも4パチ。プレイステーション。
In order to make their game run better, they had to literally take the PlayStation apart. And they realized that alongside a CPU and a GPU, it had a side CPU to do some very specific math that they could take advantage of. There were some built-in libraries that they would delete some parts of them to borrow memory for their game. They even got Sony to do some changes to PlayStation to improve it.
時代は今クラッシュバンディクーさあ皆さんご一緒に予想以上に大好評クラッシュバンディクーしかも4パッチプレイステーション
Creating Crash Bandicoot wasn't just about graphics or levels. It was also about building a system that could handle the game's fast and dynamic world. Andy Gavin believed that the standard C programming language was clunky for the kind of game they wanted to make. So he created a custom language called Ghoul, Game-Oriented Object Lisp. Ghoul allowed the team to think like designers while coding, giving them the tools to make objects, enemies, and environmental hazards behave exactly how they wanted. Instead of being bogged down in a low-level technical details, the developers could focus on how the players would experience the game, from bouncing crates to rolling boulders or a charging enemy. The system made it easier to prototype ideas quickly, adjust enemy patterns, and fine-tune level interactions. It wasn't just efficiency. Ghoul directly enabled the gameplay creativity that made Crash's world feel alive, responsive, and fun. Every spin, jump, and hazard could be adjusted to make the game challenging but fair, giving the player an experience that was both fast-paced and satisfying.
ゲームやりすぎ気をつけよご飯を食べてね宿題やって寝るのも忘れないでねラララプレイステーションプレイステーション
Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever tried to remove a PS1 disc while playing it? Some games stop working, but some games continue running to some extent. This happened to me when as a kid, I was playing Simba's Mighty Adventure and my baby brother removed the disc. I was surprised to see the game is still working. It was a little bit glitchy, but it was working. That's because PS1 games are relatively small and the PS1 can read the necessary files and store them into the RAM, so the console isn't always reading from the disk. You could say the primary use of the CD is for the music. There are even some cases of games that you only need to put the disc in the console for a few seconds, and when the game is loaded, you could replace them with a disc filled with music, and like that you could play the game while you would listen to the music of your own choice. I said this to show you that sometimes the disc is just rotating in the console for no reason. This is what Andy Gavin believed, so he tried to take advantage of that. He invented the data chunk system. Imagine something like this. File size of each level is 1 megabyte and it is loaded in the beginning of each level. But thanks to the data chunk system, the crash levels could be larger than 1 megabyte. Because instead of loading 1 megabyte once, it could load 64 kilobytes many times. Instead of loading the entire level, they could only load the part of the level they needed. That's why the camera in the game usually doesn't go through a straight line. There will always be some curves in the way so that the far parts of the level would be hidden. This worried Sony. The console would read from the CD too many times, but they decided to run with it because Crash Bandicoot could be a killer app for the PS1.
Stop looking at me. What's wrong with these people? Never see a Bandicoot before?
Most 3D animations of the time would use the bone system, which would get the job done for realistic animations. But for a Looney Tunes style of animation, it was impossible to do it on PS1. So they did vertex animation instead, and in order to understand it, let's have a relatively unrelated example. You know how the animation of Donkey Kong Country works, right? They had a 3D model of Donkey Kong with bones, and it would move through bone animation, but the SNES couldn't have a literal 3D model in it. So for each animation they needed, they would take picture of each needed frame, and like that they could import the 3D animation as a pixel art animation. That's how the likes of Mortal Kombat and Naughty Dog's Way of the Warrior worked, but instead of 3D animations, they had live action actors. Note that what I said was an oversimplification of the system. The animation of Crash Bandicoot was kinda similar to this method. They would do the animation in Power Animator, and each needed frame would be baked, and they would write down the important coordinates of the important joints, and the animation in PS1 would be done through programming and using those data.
You know how you're supposed to eat Pizza Hut stuffed crust pizza?
Bill doesn't get it. Backwards, Bill. The other way. Backwards, Bill. Backwards. That boy. Now bite it. Billy. Bite it, Billy.
Jill's not afraid to eat her stuffed crust backwards. Everybody knows how to eat stuffed crust pizza backwards. With a ring of cheese baked right into the crust, it's the most fun you can have with a pizza. A large one topping is $9.99.
Jill's made of tougher stuff than Bill.
Take a bite, Billy. Backwards, Bill. Keep your chin up, Bill.
Stuffed crust, another one of the best pizzas under one roof.
Crash Bandicoot isn't just about jumping on crates. It's about constant motion, tension, and quick decision making. Naughty Dog knew that in a 3D platformer, players could simply move cautiously and avoid challenge. To keep the gameplay exciting, they designed levels that forced action, reaction, and strategy. One of the most iconic examples is the rolling boulder sequences, inspired by Indiana Jones. It wasn't just a cinematic moment. It pushed the players to move fast, make split-second decisions, and feel the thrill of danger. Similarly, crates, collapsing platforms, and hazards were carefully placed to create risk and reward situations, where players had to judge timing, jumps, and positioning. Animal riding sections, where Crash goes forward automatically, also reinforced this philosophy. Players would steer and react, but the forward momentum created a sense of urgency and flow that made the levels feel alive. Even the camera and level layout were designed with momentum in mind. Curves, slopes, and obstacles guided players naturally through each environment, keeping the experience fast-paced yet intuitive. Every design decision, from a simple crate to a high-speed chase, was about making the player feel engaged, challenged, and entertained.
Are we enjoying ourselves today, folks?
Well, if drinking white wine out of a 4-ounce glass is your idea of enjoyment, see, it's white wine in a 3-ounce glass, red in a full.
Hey, you with the goatee! 2 words for you, pal. Lighten up. Frenchie, I need an extension cord, some buffalo wings. Go. Au revoir. Raising the roof with the coot. How you doing? Who's bored? Raise your hand. Anybody? Look who's happy now.
PlayStation.
You can't literally translate a 2D platformer into a 3D one, because in a 2D game you can only jump over an enemy, but when an extra dimension is added, there are many ways of just passing enemies by, and Naughty Dog had to do many math to come up with a solution. They were subscribed to many Japanese video game magazines to see if there was any competition, and to their surprise, barely anyone had had thought about making a 3D platformer until an E3 that the first prototype of Mario 64 was revealed and Naughty Dog was worried. Nintendo had done a seemingly perfect first attempt at 3D platformers, but there were two minor inconveniences that Naughty Dog could take advantage of. First was that because of having an open world, Mario 64 didn't have enough memory to have the best graphics, so their game could look better. Second was that Mario 64 could be complicated to some people, so their game could be an easier introduction to gaming. During the same E3, Shigeru Miyamoto played Crash Bandicoot and he told them that he liked the game, especially the water effects.
Let's cooking! 今日はクッキング対決。クラッシュさん、パラッパさん、張り切っていきましょう。おっと、クラッシュさん、今日は珍しく真剣です。一方、パラッパさんはどうでしょう。良い子です。ああ、気持ちいい。パラッパさんはハンバーグ。クラッシュさんは果物を取り出した。なるほど、ハンバーグといえば当然ミキサー。果物といえば当然油炒め。火は強火です。不思議な匂いが会場に立ち込めてきました。さあ、お味の方はどうやら美味しいようですよ。そうは見えないけど。リンゴの三段ソテー、アジの開き添え、伊勢海老のフロマージュソーストロピカル風。では試食していただきましょう。それはあなたです。
私？何なのこの料理。
好き嫌いはやめようね。プレイステーション。
Even with enough funding, the technology of the time made the tasks very difficult for the team. Dave Baggett created a software called DLE, short for Dave's Level Editor. It let them use Photoshop to edit the levels. They would create images that look like top-down view of the levels. Exporting the levels would take a long time. If they saw a tiny issue in the level, after fixing it they had to export the levels again, and it would take hours. They had to do extra programming for each level so that they could run smoothly on PlayStation. For example, if one tree couldn't be seen because it was behind another tree, then it didn't need to be rendered until the player would get close enough to it.
Bill's afraid to eat his stuffed crust backwards.
I'm not afraid. Don't speak. Don't be afraid. Stuffed crust pizza has a ring of cheese baked right into the crust, and a large one topping is $9.99.
Keep your chin up, Bill.
Stuffed crust, another one of the best pizzas under one roof.
Once Naughty Dog had a platform and a basic game concept, the next challenge was obvious: the character. The first question was style. Cartoons had become popular again, so Andy and Jason wanted a hero inspired by the humor and exaggeration of classic cartoons. Looney Tunes style animation gave characters energy, emotion, and personality, perfect for a fast-paced, visually expressive platformer. That decision influenced everything, from the snappy jumps and spins to Crash's exaggerated facial expressions. Next came species. They needed an animal Americans didn't know, something they could own, like how Sonic owned the hedgehog. The first choice was a wombat, small, scrappy, and a little bit wild. Early on he was called Willy the Wombat, but once they discovered the wombat was already taken, they chose the Bandicoot. The Bandicoot fit perfectly, nimble, quirky, and unfamiliar, yet instantly appealing. Naming followed gameplay. Since smashing crates became central to the experience, names like Smash, Bash, and Dash were tossed around, but Crash ultimately captured the energy, chaos, and attitude of the game. It was simple, punchy, and unforgettable. The villain came just as naturally. Mad scientists were a familiar trope in cartoons, but Dr. New Cortex, a name based on a scientific term, needed to be readable in low polygon 3D. Exaggerated features, bold colors, and strong silhouette made him instantly recognizable. To lock in this visual identity, Naughty Dog brought in professional character designers Charles Zambales and Joe Pearson. Their work established the playful cartoon-like tone that defined Crash's world. They did the same for the environments. Through landscapes with all their extra lines and detail unfolded over a longer time scale. The game would happen on 3 islands, inspired by Legend of the Lost Continent Lemuria, which, just like Atlantis, was an ancient civilization sunk into the ocean. That decision opened the door to a huge range of settings: dense jungles, industrial power stations, creepy castles, sunset-soaked temples, and hostile native villages. Early on, the team landed on the tiki concept, inspired by a restaurant they visited once. It tied everything together visually, resulting in a goofy, exaggerated Easter Island-style tikis scattered throughout the world. But translating those expressive sketches into a playable PlayStation character was where reality set in. On paper, Charles and Joe could draw anything they imagined, but once those drawings hit the PlayStation, everything had to survive on a harsh set of technical limits. The console was powerful, but not powerful enough. The screen resolution was low, polygon budgets were tight, lighting models were crude, and most players were still using old CRT televisions that mangled color and detail. Every artistic choice had to justify itself mathematically. Crash's appearance, just like Mario, was shaped almost entirely by those constraints. His orange fur wasn't a stylistic preference, it was a practical solution. The team surveyed existing characters and potential environments, then eliminated colors that bled or disappeared on consumer TVs. Red was unusable, darker tones vanished into jungle shadows, and lava levels, common in platformers, were abandoned entirely because orange characters simply vanished against them. Crash was orange because orange was readable, and entire level themes lived or died because of it. His oversized head and necklace silhouettes came from the same necessity, with Crash occupying only a fraction of the screen. Subtle facial features would have been invisible. A large face meant expressions could be read instantly, even from a distance. The result was a character who moved strangely, turning his whole body instead of his head, but one whose emotions were always clear. That clarity became central to Crash's appeal. Small details served similar functional purposes. The gloves, the spots on his back, and the lighter chest color weren't decorative flair. They were visual landmarks. With low polygon counts and weak lighting, those contrasting colors helped players instantly understand Crash's orientation and movement. If you saw spots, you knew you were looking at his back. As his arms crossed his body while running, the black gloves stood out against the orange blur, letting your brain feel in the motion that the hardware couldn't fully render. Many early design ideas hadn't survived this translation. Tails, straps, long pants, and fine patterns were quickly discarded, not because they looked bad on paper, but because they would flicker, disappear, or turn into distracting noise once reduced to a handful of pixels. Even something as small as a striped hat failed the math. Stripes thinner than a pixel simply couldn't exist. Crash did eventually get a belly button, but it had to be twice as large as life just to be seen. By the time these decisions were locked in, Crash's look wasn't just a cartoon homage or a clever species choice. It was also the product of constant negotiation between imagination and limitation. Every exaggerated feature, every bold color, and every simplified shape existed to solve a problem. and in doing so, they gave Crash his unmistakable personality. In the end, Crash Bandicoot wasn't just a Looney Tunes inspired platformer set in a vibrant island. It was a masterclass in making early 3D readable, expressive, and fun. Crash didn't succeed in spite of the PlayStation's limitations. He succeeded because Naughty Dog embraced them and designed a character who could thrive within them.
英雄クラッシュバンディクーを称える踊りです。さあ皆さんご一緒に。今日も主役はこんなやつ。3D オクスクロールアクションゲームクラッシュバンディクー、しかも4パッチ。
プレイステーション
Dan Colmorgan was assigned as Crash's sound engineer. Naughty Dog also brought in Josh Mantel and Mark Mothersbaugh of Devo fame. For each level, the entire music and sound team were given a rendering or a verbal description or a gameplay videotape to get the feeling of the level. Josh Mantel would build a percussion track that felt right tempo-wise, and after that chose an instrument palette that reflected the level. At first, the music was very manic, which wasn't what Naughty Dog wanted. They wanted an ambient sort of sound so that it wouldn't distract the player. In the end, the music team came up with an ambient series of soundtracks that, despite being relatively calm, had personality, which backed up the game. The way Crash says is probably the #1 meme of the franchise.
Well, well, well. If it isn't Crash Bandicoot, welcome.
And that's because of how good and iconic it is. You might assume that this voice is generated or at least altered by computer because of how inhuman it sounds. But no, this voice is the result of a talented voice actor named Brendan O'Brien. Rest in peace. He was suggested by Joe Pearson to Naughty Dog. Brendan's parents used to work at Universal, so it was a nostalgic experience to him. The voice acting and the sound effects were recorded below the Alfred Hitchcock Theater at a scoring stage where lots of famous soundtracks were taped.
Das passiert hier jetzt dauernd. Wir nennen es die Crash Bandicoot-Welle nach dem PlayStation-Spiel. Wir beschlagnahmen jede Woche Hunderte davon. Sehen Sie mal. Sony PlayStation. It's not a game.
Up until this point, Naughty Dog had been a two-person operation, Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin. But Crash Bandicoot was an ambitious experiment in 3D platforming. To make it real, they needed a team capable of matching their vision. The first additions were technical experts. Dave Baggett, a friend of Andy's from MIT, joined as a programmer. He helped build the core engine, develop gameplay systems, and solve the complex problems of rendering 3D environments on PlayStation hardware. Without him, many of the innovations that made Crash run smoothly would have been impossible. Next came visual and animation talent. Taylor Kurosaki, a visual effects artist from TV, who literally joined them because he was curious about the animation software they were using, brought expertise in animation pipelines and technical artistry. He worked to make characters move with energy and personality, turning the Looney Tunes inspired sketches into fluid, expressive 3D models. Bob Raffay stepped in as art director, guiding the look of the world and coordinating the artists to ensure a consistent style. Justin Monost and Dan Colmorgan handled characters, textures, props, and environmental details. Together they translated concept art into playable levels, keeping the game both visually appealing and technically feasible. Charlotte Francis would later join the team as an artist and the only female member of the team. One of the most important things she has done was modifying Crash's design in order to make him appealing to the Japanese audience. But none of the team members stick to their own job. Both on the programming side and the design side, it was a completely collaborated effort. Every member would help each other in what they were doing. On the publisher side, Universal Interactive assigned Dave Sealer as producer, managing schedules and expectations, while Mark Cerny acted as executive producer, helping Naughty Dog navigate the PlayStation hardware and advising on design decisions. Contracted character designers Charles Zambales and Joe Pearson continued refining the look and personality of Crash, Cortex, and the world around them. This team wasn't just bigger, it was more specialized. Each new member allowed Naughty Dog to push the limits of the PlayStation. More polygons, better animations, richer environments, and tighter gameplay. Crash Bandicoot wasn't a two-person dream anymore. It was a collaborative experiment in 3D platforming. By combining technical skill, artistic vision, and disciplined project management, Naughty Dog created a team capable of turning a bold idea into a playable and polished game. Without this careful expansion, the technical and design challenges of Crash might have been impossible to overcome.
Bandicoot. Definition. A family of rabbit-sized rat-like marsupials indigenous to Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania. Crash Bandicoot. Definition. Heroic, hyperactive, and hairy. Join Crash as he whirls his way through the gruesome gauntlet of Bandicoot-hating, Bandicoot-smashing, Bandicoot-eating baddies. Next Generation says the designers have pulled every trick out of the bag, and Electronic Gaming Monthly calls Crash simply the hottest new product of the year. Crash Bandicoot from Sony Interactive, mate.
Sony of America was cool with Crash, but the same could not be said for Sony of Japan. It was hard to make American characters look appealing to Japan. Crash needed to have a Japanese design alongside his American one. Jason Rubin would spend his entire free time studying anime and manga until he would have an idea about a character design that appeals to Japan. Then he would go to Charlotte and give her instructions about how to modify Crash's design, making Crash smile without showing his teeth, changing his green eyes into small Pac-Man shaped black dots, and making his spikes smaller. She had to do these changes among others in less than 15 minutes. This new design showed promise to Sony of Japan. Other changes needed to be made, like some Japan exclusive hints and changes in graphics of the game. The marketing also had to be different for the Japanese audience, making him much cuter and goofier, weirdly obsessed with a Japanese singer, becoming Parappa's roommate, and of course the signature Crash dance were things that were done to make Crash popular in Japan. The music was also different in the Japanese version. There even was a Crash manga.
しまわないとポイッと捨てちゃうわよラララプレイステーションプレイステーション
The name Crash Bandicoot was obvious to Naughty Dog, but not to Sony and Universal. They wanted names like Wezi Wombat or Ozzy the Ottsel, and weren't willing to let Naughty Dog be the one to choose the final name. Naughty Dog knew how important the name of their game and character was. A lame name could ruin their career. So they stood up and said either they let them have the name Crash Bandicoot or they would leave. It wouldn't be the only time this attitude had worked for them. Later, Universal would make an animation that would be the first thing the player would see upon inserting the disc.
Dr. Cortex is a genius, a mental aberration. He's totally fixated on world domination. The local island creatures are dull and obtuse.
Until the evil doctor turns on his juice, he wants them for his troops. They come out nincompoopes, most especially Crash.
Crash Bandicoot should have been a genius, but he doesn't quite compute. Crash Bandicoot. Anything can happen now that Crash is in pursuit. Tom has been selected for running through the blender. Crash will fight to save her. He'll never surrender. He'll vanquish any villain to set his girlfriend free. He doesn't have a clue about how to proceed. His heart's in the right place. His brain's been rearranged unsuccessfully. Crash Bandicoot. If Cortex isn't beaten, he'll reign absolute. Crash Bandicoot. Play our game and tell your friends so we'll make lots of loot.
They showed this animation to Naughty Dog and told them it would be in their game whether they liked it or not. The popular belief is that this animation was removed by Sony because they didn't want anything 2D in their games. But according to Jason Rubin, the real reason was that Naughty Dog hated this animation and threatening to leave was the only way to remove it. It won't be their only reasonably rebellious attitude against Universal, as during an E3, Universal tried to claim full ownership over Crash by not letting Naughty Dog attend that E3 and not mentioning their name during the event. So Naughty Dog would print the phrase Naughty Dog, creator and developer of Crash Bandicoot, on many papers, and they would give it to anyone who would enter the Crash booth at that E3.
ソフトはきちんと買いましょう計画立ててね買いましょうお小遣いを貯めてからねラララプレイステーション
Unfortunately, overworking had always been common in the game dev industry, and Naughty Dog is no exception. The team members would work 16 hours per day. They would refuse to leave the office. All Naughty Dog members were young at the time, so they wouldn't feel how much it damaged their body. Only years later they would realize how much extra pressure their body had been under. But during those days, their ambition was all that mattered. They wouldn't realize what they were doing to themselves until they took a group picture to use in their website. Only when Charlotte had to remove the black circles under their eyes in Photoshop, they realized what was happening to them. They would receive bonuses for overworking, but later they would refer to these bonuses as a golden handcuff, wondering if it really was worth it. The Naughty Dog team would spend most of their time together because of the crunch, so they would become close friends. Working too much and too hard would result in a rebellious and mischievous attitude. They would have fun sometimes, and it would usually be problematic. Their studio was close to a golf course, so they weren't allowed to use cars. As a result, they put the golf carts to the fullest use. They couldn't go faster than 30 miles per hour because of the governor inside them. But one day Justin realized this limitation was only for moving forward, so they would drive them in reverse to reach the speed of 70 miles per hour. Once they ended up losing a golf cart, it would end up in water when they were chasing a tour bus. I'm imagining how terrified some of the tourists could have been during that chase. At Universal, all the offices were quiet except for Naughty Dog. The entire team would be at Kurosaki's house each time they had a party. They also became friends with the Insomniac Games team, who were just a couple of offices next door to them.
友達を大切にねラララプレイステーション
So Sony had 60 people in a room playtesting Crash all day for months. Each week Naughty Dog would get 500 pages of facts documenting countless bugs. The debugging process hit Andy and Dan hard. Not all the bugs were actual bugs. More than a few of them were just cases of the player being confused, but nonetheless they had to solve them all because they knew some players would blame the game instead of themselves. The marketing manager of Crash Bandicoot, Amy Blair, alongside Eric Moe and Chris Graves, had marketing ideas that were brave. Video game advertisement campaigns in the first half of the 90s were aggressive. Genesis Does What Nintendo Don't being the most famous example of it. Back then, attacking your rival was a mean of advertisement, and Amy Blair intended to keep it that way in the latter half of the 90s. This was one of the Crash 1 advertisements.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Pack up your stuff. I got a little surprise for you here.
Check it out. What do you think about that? We got real-time, 3D, lush organic environments. How's that make you feel, buddy?
Feel a little like your days are numbered?
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
You're hurting my elbow.
Is that Italian?
No, Bandicoot, it's an Australian name.
The reason we see the face of the person in the suit is that this was not supposed to be Crash himself, because that would be too much on the nose. Instead, they had this idea that Crash 1 was so good, it could make some people so obsessed with it that they would dress up as Crash and have attitude against Nintendo. It was filmed in front of a building next to a Nintendo building, but not the main Nintendo building. All of these innovations, from bending the PlayStation hardware to the data chunk system to vertex animation to Ghoul, weren't just technical feats. They shaped every jump, spin, and crate in the game. They made Crash Bandicoot fast, fun, and full of personality, creating a platforming experience unlike anything that came before. Now that we've seen how the game was built, it's time to step into the shoes of the player. Let's see how these design choices feel in action, and see if Crash Bandicoot 1 still holds up as a classic after 30 years. Cortex will mutate and brainwash animals to build an army. Their commander was supposed to be Crash Bandicoot, but something goes wrong during the brainwashing process. Crash escapes, but his girlfriend Tana, inspired by Jessica Rabbit, is still captured by Cortex. So he must reach him and save her. So we have to navigate him back to Cortex. We move with the D-pad, because the game was out before the PS1 analog controller. Even with the analog stick you can't move in more than 8 directions. You jump with the cross button. By pressing the square button, Crash will rotate, which is his way of attacking. For Crash's rotating animation, he has a separate model. By pressing the triangle, you can see how many lives and Wumpas you have. And that's the entire input system. Each level is full of Wumpas, and collecting 100 of them gives you an extra life. There are enemies that can be killed by rotating or jumping or both. But some enemies should be avoided unless you are invincible. Rotating will throw an enemy in a straight line, and the enemies on its way will also be killed, which rewards you with a Wumpa for each enemy. There are many types of crates. There's the regular crate with a Wumpa in it, Crash crates that give you an extra life, surprise crate that in it you can either find from 5 to 10 Wumpas or an extra life, or a token of Tana, Cortex, or Brio. Cortex's right hand man. Iron crate, which is indestructible. Checkpoint crate, which is a checkpoint. Aku crate, which gives you an Aku mask. By default you die by 1 hit, but this mask gives you an extra hit. Getting 3 of them makes you temporarily invincible, and when it wears off it goes back to 2 masks. There are outline crates that are invisible and they will be activated by hitting a switch crate. Arrow crate that can work like a spring. Bounce box that has many Wumpas in it, and by jumping on them it will give you Wumpas one by one until it runs out of Wumpas and breaks. Or you can just spin into it, which will break the box immediately, but it won't give you any Wumpas. Hitting them from below with your head has the same result as jumping on them, which sometimes results in this. And TNTs that after jumping on them they will explode in 3 seconds. Don't rotate into them. In order to save your progress, you should obtain a gem by breaking all crates without dying, or collect 3 Tana tokens and reach the goal in the bonus section. Collecting 3 Brio tokens simply takes you to a bonus level, and collecting 3 Cortex tokens gives you a key if you reach the goal in its bonus level. Some gems are colored and are needed to break all crates in some levels. It is frustrating, but usually the levels that have Tana tokens need colored gems. Now let's have a look at every level.
But Dr. Cortex, we have not determined the cause of past failures. Moron! This Bandicoot will be my general, and he will lead my Cortex commandos to world domination. This time I shall reign triumphant. We are closer than ever before. Quickly, into the vortex! But Dr. Cortex, the vortex is not ready. We have no idea what it could do. Failure again. Capture him! Uh-oh! Prepare the female bandit.
In Sanity Beach, Crash has landed on the beach. He gets up and we take a look at his face before he faces the opposite direction. This happened because by default we wouldn't have seen his face. In level 1 we already see a variety of places: beach, temple and jungle. The music even changes at the middle of it. When you die, you respawn from the checkpoint, but it will also respawn the crates, meaning you should either backtrack and break those crates again, or restart by pressing start and then select and then re-entering the level. So you can die before reaching the first checkpoint at each level, but after that it would be annoying. The first level already has a super satisfying moment. There is this bridge made of crates and you can either jump on them one by one, moving slightly forward after breaking each crate, or do this. Breaking all crates may require backtracking, and the first level is already a bad example of it. There are 2 paths in this level, and both of them have boxes. You can't go backward on the right path, so you might think you should go forward at right and then go backward at left. But the camera is in a way that you won't see the enemies soon enough. They had to either increase the distance between Crash and the camera, or make the enemies make a sound when Crash would get near them. Jungle rollers. In level 2, we see TNTs and arrow crates. Don't get too far from the TNTs. The game might not register the destruction of the crate near the exploded TNT if the camera can't see it. Breaking an arrow crate while being invincible also breaks the fruit box above it. It should be obvious, but I will mention that invincibility won't save you from instant kills like bottomless pits.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
The green gem will take you up to brick 3 crates. Most soft gems do stuff like this, which is annoying. I rather see a challenging extra section of the level. There are stones that roll from left to right and vice versa, and you shouldn't touch them. The Great Gate. Level 3 is in 2.5D. We will see the iron variation of arrow crates, which obviously can't be broken, but also sometimes iron crates are above them and they will send them up and down. Getting crushed by them damages you. You can make some platforms by jumping and rotating into these things. When you jump on turtles, you can use them as springs. While being sent up by turtles and arrow crates, you can hold cross to jump even higher. Don't stick to the hazards while invincible. They won't hurt you, but they might become slower, which can slow you down. Some natives wield shields, so unless you are invincible, they will throw you away, which doesn't hurt you, but there are bottomless pits and hazards everywhere. So you should jump high above them, which makes them use the shield like an umbrella. That's when you can use them as weak springs or rotate and kill them. There are some green slippery slopes that slowly sends you down. The final part of the level can only be accessed with the yellow gem. This is the proper way of using a gem, not just revealing 3 hidden crates. Be careful not to break arrow crates before you are finished with them. There are some crates hidden behind the wall, but the arrow crates hint their existence. The level has a fun use of arrow crates to make platforming challenges. Boulders. Level 4 is the first boulder chase level. I hated them as a kid, but now I like the challenge. You should move fast and avoid the obstacles that slow you down. The boulder won't break the crates for you, so there's extra challenge. Also, you see the worried expression on Crash's face when he is being chased. From my understanding, he always has that face while moving, but since we won't see his face when he is moving forward, they didn't find the need to have a different expression for moving forward, which makes sense considering the limitation of the time. Upstream. At level 5 we are going through waterfalls. There are moving platforms and piranha plants that can be platforms, but they will eat you if you stay too long on them. They have a blue variant that open and close their mouth based on a pattern. You can break crates below you like this. Yellow gem reveals crates at the middle and the end of the level. Papu Papu. The first boss fight of the game is the true neutral character of the franchise, the leader of the natives. He is neither an ally of Crash nor Cortex. He is just minding his own business, but we unintentionally bother him, so now we have to fight him. He is the most pathetic boss fight of all time. Losing to him is impossible. He will rotate his staff. You should avoid it, jump on his chair, and then jump on his head 3 times to defeat him. Rolling stones. This one is a slightly more challenging version of jungle rollers. Falling platforms, more pits, more stones, more enemies, more TNTs, and a few boxes that can only be accessed with the blue gem. This is one of the few levels in which you can enter a bonus stage by collecting Brio tokens. But all these stages give you is just bragging rights. Hog Wild. In each Crash game, in some levels Crash will ride an animal, which would be like an auto-scroller but on steroids. Crash's animal of choice in Crash 1 is a warthog. They will move forward fast and you can make them go left and right and also jump. These levels are full of hazards and crates that you can miss, and since you can't backtrack in these levels, you should restart. Despite this, these levels are fun. and also that face Crash makes before hopping on, I have this feeling that Crash riding the Warthog isn't just literal. Native Fortress. Now this level is a more challenging version of the Great Gate, except here you can use a turtle to take a shortcut. Feel free to do it because there is no crate on the main path. In both levels, sometimes when you fall, you should redo some stuff instead of dying. The red gem will send you high on the clouds to break more crates. Up the creek. This level is a more challenging version of Upstream. It gives you ton of tokens, but it actually doesn't need any colored gem. But there is this switch crate that makes you backtrack the level to break 2 crates that are in a dangerous place. Ripperoo, now the second boss fight. One of Cortex's mutated animals. He is a kangaroo, but as a kid I thought he was a dog. As a kid I was scared of him because of those eyes. Something went wrong during his brainwashing process as well, which made him crazy but still loyal to Cortex. He is the only character in the game who isn't voiced by Brendan O'Brien. There are 9 platforms on water. On each phase he will jump on some of them with a pattern. There are big TNTs moving on water. You should jump on them with precise timing so that they would explode right next to him. At phase 1 he only jumps on the middle platform and the 2 down corner platform. At phase 2 he jumps on all non-corner platforms except for the one at top, and at phase 3 he shapes a rhombus with his movement. The Lost City, another 2.5D level. It has also crates behind a wall and you should take advantage of the 2.5D nature of the level to break them. Sometimes 2 bats are clinging to a wall, and as long as at least one of them is alive, more bats will fly between them. Here you should hold cross on this box to hit a switch crate that can't be seen. In order to reveal this crate here, there are big bricks that come in and out of the wall that try to push you into water. Each has a different pattern. There are also many moving platforms and ones that come inside and outside the wall, so jumping on them requires precise timing. There are 2 jumping enemies, the red ones that follow you and the green ones that move according to a simple pattern. They can only be killed by jumping on them, but be careful when you do it because sometimes they are needed to reach a crate. This level also gives you ton of tokens despite not needing colored gems. The reason is probably the difficulty of the level. Temple Rooms. A difficult level. Switches from 2D to 3D a lot. There are crates that will become visible only when you step on them. Their existence is suggested by the Wumpas. Also be careful at the end of the level. The bats might get you killed the last second. Road to Nowhere. A bridge level. In most parts of them, you don't even need to go left or right, but still it is one of the hardest levels. Most parts of the bridge is broken. So basically the entire level is a bottomless pit. There are regular woods that are platforms, red woods that are falling platforms, and icy woods that obviously have ice physics. There are warthogs that even when you are invincible, you can't hurt them. They seem to be vengeful after the Hog Wild level. This one needs a red gem to be completed. Breaking all boxes is like a micro puzzle. There is also a red gem at the end of the level. This level was where I gave up as a kid, but now I enjoy its tight platforming. Boulder Dash. The second Boulder Chase level. It's like the first one, but more challenging. Here I made a discovery that could be just my imagination, but I think you move faster when you are rotating. In the end of this level, you need the purple gem to be sent below at the bottom of a not so bottomless pit to break more crates. But be careful not to jump too high because you might touch a trigger that registers a death from a bottomless pit. I love the lighting and coloring down here. Sunset Vista. You could say this one is infamous. and that's for a good reason. It is one of the hardest levels of the game. It is similar to the Lost City, but much more challenging. It is one of those two levels with a key in them. By collecting the 3 Cortex tokens of this level, you will be sent to his bonus stage, and by reaching the goal, you will collect a key, and with it you can unlock an optional level. This level has one crate behind this column, in a place that you can barely see the crate. Someone had a bad day during the making of this level. This one also needs an enemy to break a crate, but if you made a mistake, you can still break it if you have 2 Aku Aku masks, because you can get the 3rd one here to break it. Whole Hog. It is one of the 2 optional levels that require a key to open. Those keys can be obtained by finishing a Cortex special stage by collecting his tokens in a level. This one is another Warthog riding level. This one is hard, but like other animal riding levels, it is fun. Koala Kong. Now the 3rd boss fight. He is a koala and gorilla hybrid if I'm not mistaken. He throws rocks at you and you should spin a split second before the rock hits you to kinda parry it. Some TNTs will fall down. I stay at the rightest part of the place, and like that I easily avoid them. When he moves and throws a big rock, first evade it and then rotate into it to send it back at him. But make sure not to do it when a mine cart is in front of him. Do it 4 times to defeat him. Heavy Machinery. This one is a tough 2D level, and it is actually one of the first levels to be made. There are these enemies that look like they can only be damaged from above or below, right? Wrong. They can't be attacked at all, unless you have a mask that you are willing to trade with its destruction. There are hot plums that you can't touch, and cold ones that you can touch. Now, aren't these 2 enemies too low? It looks suspicious. Is there something hidden down there? Yup, a few crates. There are these spatial springs that send you too high in the air. Sometimes they are a curse, sometimes they are a blessing. And there are big tubes that dangerous steams come out of them. Then there are moving platforms that go under plums and requires you to jump in time to survive. This level also has a Brio spatial stage, but this one is fun. Cortex Power. This one took me an hour to complete, and yet it is one of my favorite levels. There are hot and cold plums, and electricity goes left and right on them. Some enemies have machine guns, and if you become invincible, it can have a funny outcome. It needs a blue gem to be completed. The level divides into many paths, and they all have crates. Backtracking in this level, despite being very difficult, was fun. Generator Room. A super hard but super fun level. We are in a dark industrial place and we can see the face of Cortex on a few monitors. This level is full of spiked enemies, moving platforms, hazards, and bottomless pits. Everything you have learned during the game will be tested here. Breaking all crates will reward you with a yellow gem. Also, I think here is a good part to mention the storytelling of Crash 1. You saw that at the beginning of the game, all the levels were natural places, but slowly we would see more and more industrial levels. And here, you can't find a natural thing at all. And you can see the face of Cortex a few places. It shows how Cortex is turning these beautiful islands into ugly places. Although older games like Sonic 1 did storytellings like this better, I can still appreciate its existence. It's something that we will not see in the later Crash games. Toxic Waste. A very linear but challenging level. Some enemies will throw barrels at you. Some of them simply roll on floor, but some also jump up and down while going forward. Timing is the key to survival in this level. You should pay close attention to where the toxic barrels will land and move according to it. Breaking all crates gives you the blue gem. Pinstripe, the fourth boss fight. Back when Crash was a wombat, this guy used to be a bandicoot. When they decided to make Crash a bandicoot, they changed the species of this guy. He is shooting with his machine gun. When he is moving or loading the gun, aka when he is not shooting, you should attack him once and then take cover again. Yeah, it has style but no depth. The high road. The other bridge level. This one is even harder but still fun. You can find a hidden place with crates in it by going backward using invisible platforms. Slippery Climb, the other infamous level of the game, because it is probably the hardest one. It is in 2.5D, it's raining and you're outside of a castle. Platforms that move or go inside and outside the wall, spikes, bottomless pits, stairs that become slopes for a while, vultures that are enemies and platforms at the same time, and more. Yeah, there is a lot to tackle. Breaking all crates give you the red gem. It is becoming a broken record at this point, but I did enjoy it. Funny thing is that there was supposed to be a level like this, but even harder. It was called Stormy Ascent. Some levels were too hard before release, so they had to tweak them until they became easy enough. But for Stormy Ascent, they ran out of time, so they had to remove it. The level can still be played using cheats like Game Shark, but it made its official return on the remake of the game. Lights Out. This level has an interesting gimmick. No matter how many masks you get, it always counts as one. Aku Aku shines in this level, but will run out of light. So you must get a new mask to refresh it. You need to do this because the level is in pitch black. It is too dark. If you run out of light or lose the mask, you can't see anything. It has a fun challenge. With the yellow gem, you can break all crates and take a shortcut. This will give you the purple gem. Jaws of Darkness. One of the hardest and longest levels. You need the blue gem to break all crates. You can also get the second key by collecting the 3 Cortex tokens. Getting the first one is easy, but the second one, you see this snake here? Don't spin straight into it because it will break a crate that has a Cortex token, but it won't register it. So attack the snake from another angle. And for the third one, you should use invisible platform. Fumbling in the Dark, the other optional level. In this one also you are in eternal darkness. You can find many crates by going backward. It is another really hard but fun level. Castle Machinery. In this level the goal is right in front of you, but you can't reach it, so the long way it is. It is like heavy machinery but more fun. It also has a dangerous section with many crates. With the green gem, you can take a shortcut and get tons of extra lives while finishing the level in 5 seconds. Yes, you don't need the gem to break crates. Nitrus Brio, the 5th boss fight. He throws red potions that should be evaded and green potions that turn into goo and you must jump on them. When he is close to dying, he drinks his potions and makes a Hulk reference. You should use a fallen brick to jump on his head to defeat him. The Lab, the final traditional level and my favorite one. This level is full of bridges and doors that should be opened with switch crates. There are devices that throw electricity back and forth, so be careful when you cross them. There is a yellow goo that acts like the green ones. And there are robots that shock you sometimes, and you should attack them 3 times when they are not shocking to get rid of them. The only problem is this TNT hidden in the crates. With the exception of that, it is a challenging but fun level that pushes your talents to the limits. Breaking all crates give you the yellow gem. The Great Hall. Without the gems, the level literally takes 3 seconds. But if you have collected every gem, In a very satisfying way, all the gems turn into platforms, and using them you can find and rescue Tana, and with her you can fly away and live happily ever after. Dr. Neo Cortex, the final boss, and it is a little bit disappointing. He can shoot purple energy balls that you should evade, blue ones that will move across the screen, and green ones that you should rotate just before they hit you to send them back at Dr. Cortex. And just like that, you can easily defeat him. Now I'm going to rank the levels. I will count the boss fights as levels as well. And also note that I enjoyed all the levels. Even the levels that are low ranked, I still enjoyed them. Number 33. Papu Papu. The only reason you may die here is not being used to the controls. Number 32. Pinstripe. It looks cool, but it is very simple. You just do nothing until you see an opening. Number 31. Koala Kong. It is kinda like Pinstripe in the way of waiting for an opening, but you are actually doing something while waiting. Number 30. Dr. Neo Cortex. It is simple for a final boss. Number 29. Dr. Nitrus Brio. Looks cool, and for almost the entire fight you need to move. Number 28. Reaper Roo. It actually requires you to think. Number 27. Jungle Rollers. There is a better version of this level. Number 26. Upstream. Same thing with Jungle Rollers, but a little bit more challenging. Number 25. Fumbling in the Dark. It is a little bit too hard, and there is a similar level that actually feels fair to me. Number 24. Native Fortress. There is a level similar to it that actually has a good use for a colored gem. Number 23. Road to Nowhere. There is a slightly better version of it, but still a challenging and fun level. Number 22. Sunset Vista. Same with Fumbling in the Dark, it also has one unfair crate placement, but still feels more fun than the levels below it. Number 21. Boulder Dash. If it wasn't for that weird way of using a colored gem that kills the flow, it would have swapped place with the other boulder level. Number 20. Hog Wild. A really fun level, but there is a more challenging version above. Number 19. Heavy Machinery. One of the most challenging levels, and I love it, but there is a better version. Number 18. The Great Hall. The levels below this level all have better variants, but from now on everything is original. This level is satisfying but not challenging. Number 17. Rolling Stones. A fun level, but the way it uses a color gem is annoying. Number 16. Sanity Beach. A great first level with a section that easily separates the pro from the noob, just has a little bit of a backtracking issue. Number 15. Up the Creek. Its way of backtracking is less annoying and more challenging. Number 14. The Great Gate. No backtracking and probably the best use of a colored gem. Number 13. The Lost City. A very challenging and fun level, but has one crate that breaking it has no room for failure. Number 12. Temple Ruins. A relatively unique, long, hard but fun level, but one annoying thing at the end of it. Number 11. The High Road. Hard but fun level, and it doesn't kill the flow with a colored gem, but the beginning of it is a little bit annoying. Number 10. Jaws of Darkness. One of the most challenging levels, and I am here for it. Number 9. Generator Room. Like Jaws of Darkness, but with a creepy atmosphere that I like. Number 8. Slippery Climb. Challenging like Generator Room, but slightly more unique. Number 7. Castle Machinery. The most challenging 2D level, and a satisfying way of using a colored gem. Number 6. Toxic Waste. This level needs the most timing, which makes you think. Number 5. Cortex Power. A challenging but fun branching in a level. Number 4. Lights Out. A hard but fun level with an interesting gimmick. Number 3, Whole Hog. I love the animal riding levels in Crash games. Number 2, Boulders. The flow of this level is the most satisfying. And number 1, the lab. No 2D sections, and I believe that this level is like an exam of everything you had been taught before. A great final level.
英雄クラッシュバンディクーを称える踊りです。さあ皆さんご一緒に。今日も主役はこんなやつ。 3D オクスクロールアクションクラッシュバンディクー、しかも4パチ。プレイステーション。
Crash 1 is a good game, but it has its flaws. It was not the first game Mark, Jason or Andy made, but it was the first game for most of the team. And besides, the game industry was still new and many people were still just figuring it out. And also many things like the 3D technology, memory cards and CD games were new, so they were bound to make mistakes here and there. Just the fact that you had to earn the ability to save your progress shows they were learning as they were developing. Players that were good at it would get many extra lives they didn't need, meanwhile players who were bad at it would barely ever get extra lives. So playing this game requires patience and context. The reaction to Crash 1 was kinda mixed. It ended up releasing around a month after Mario 64, and people couldn't help but compare them. Some people say Crash wasn't a real 3D game because you could say the game is just a 2D platformer but from a different point of view. In the eyes of many, Mario 64 was the true 3D game. In Mario 64, you had freedom. Meanwhile, in Crash 1, there was a fixed path that would always stay the same. Because of this, at first Crash 1 had just good enough sales. This wasn't the only problem. At the end of Crash Bandicoot's development, some disagreements would happen. A few days before the Crash 1 launch party, Dan Colmorgan ended up being laid off or willingly leaving Naughty Dog after not being invited to the Crash 1 launch party, despite crunching for a long time. This wasn't the only conflict. In the 85th issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly, it was said that Joe Pearson and Charles Zambales, who created Crash Bandicoot, only came to tweak the project. Whether it was exactly what Naughty Dog said or just a lie written by the reporters, Joe Pearson would never work with Naughty Dog again, and the relationship of Charles Zambales with Naughty Dog would become rough. The other problem was Dave Sealer. He has many sketches of Crash 1 levels that led to debate. Some people say Naughty Dog created the levels based on his sketches, and others say he actually was nothing but a problem, and he drew those sketches after Naughty Dog created the levels in order to claim ownership of something that he didn't own. To this day, people can't agree on which side of the story is true. Now you might wonder, why did we get more Crash games if the first one wasn't that big of a success? Well, that's because it eventually did become a big success. At first most people might have overlooked it, but word of mouth did its thing. Those who gave the game a fair chance and realized how good it is and started mentioning it. So a chain event happened and more people would play it. Each year it would sell more than the last, and by the time Crash Team Racing was out, it had become one of the highest grossing PS1 games, silencing some Sony executives that didn't like how cartoonish Crash was. At first, I wasn't a fan of Crash 1. I loved Crash 2 and 3, but the first one was too difficult for me, to a point that I used to prefer Wrath of Cortex over it. Each time I would give Crash 1 another chance, it would still make me rage quit. But while playing it for this video, suddenly it clicked with me. Suddenly I was having fun with it. Maybe playing Crash 4 has made me much better at Crash games, but maybe it is because I was playing it the legit way. As a kid I didn't have fun because I wasn't talented enough. As a teenager I didn't have fun because I would use save states, which would make it too easy and it would also kill the flow. But now I was old enough to have better reflexes, but I wasn't using save states anymore. I was playing it on emulator with a PS5 controller, but I would play it as if I was playing it on a PS1 with no cheating. I realized that Crash 1 is a difficult but fun game. The real reason I didn't like it that much is because Crash 2 is so good, playing Crash 1 after it would be disappointing. If we lived in a world that Crash never got any sequels, it could have easily been one of my favorite games of all time. So the final question is, now that we live in a world that the foundations of this game have been built upon, should you really check this game out? Well, it depends. If you are not that good at platformers, then no, probably not. But if you are good at this type of games, then yes. But I guess you can play its remake instead. I don't like the kinda realistic art style of it, and I prefer the original versions of Crash 2 and 3 over their remakes. But for the case of Crash 1, I say play the remake because it has removed all the unfair stuff from it. You can save the level after each level whether you complete it or not. You will still have to break all the boxes to obtain the gems, but you don't have to do it without dying. And the TNTs will always break the boxes around them no matter how far you are from it. So Crash 1 was successful, which means they would work on a sequel to it immediately. Now everyone has believed in Crash Bandicoot and has accepted him as the unofficial face of PS1. So all Naughty Dog had to do was to use everything they have learned from Crash 1 and the games they made before it to make the best game they can. But that is the story for another time.